Good afternoon, Professor Walter Williams.
Good afternoon, Clemson Brown.
It is wonderful to be here in your very beautiful home in Chicago, July 16th, 2009, to continue a series of interviews that we began years ago. Professor Williams, I'd like to open today by asking you, what is the first thing humanity should be taught about themselves to help them understand their humanity and the oneness with the universe that they have?
Well, the first thing, Brother Clemson, that any human of any race, creed, or color should be taught is something about their own personal humanity. And once they know something about their own personal humanity, then all of humanity will be served better because of the understanding of what they know about themselves as a human being. Let me break that down a little further. Every human that's walking this earth, no matter what race, creed, or color that they may be, has a mother and a father that was used as human instruments to bring forth them and all of humanity into this world that we know today. This is what should be taught to the individual child as that child develops in age. They should be taught that coming from their mother's womb, they were attached to her umbilical cord. And the doctor, at the time of their birth, cut that umbilical cord to separate them from their mother, thereby beginning for them at that point, life independently was now in progress for that individual human being. When that life surge began to move about in their being, in their essence, that is the spiritual power that they were given by the use of their mother and father as human instruments to bring them forth in this world. Now, mind you, this spiritual power that they were given is called their personal divine spiritual birthright. That's their birthright. Okay? Has nothing to do with the religion. This is what you're supposed to teach your child. Has nothing to do with the religion. So in other words, every human born on earth was given this spiritual power, which is called their personal divine spiritual birthright, but never was given a religion. Religion, all religions are man-made, created by man. Has nothing to do with the human being. Has nothing to do with the creation of the human being. So the human being should know something about their own personal power, which is their life, and know something about how they got here by their parents being used as human instruments. And they also should know and be taught that every human has an invisible umbilical cord. And that invisible umbilical cord is called the pineal gland, which is a sensor organ that sits in the middle of your brain. It serves as a receiver and a sender by you receiving messages from the universe and sending messages from the universe. In other words, it's a conduit. And the bottom of your pineal gland are your nostrils. What do you do with your nostrils? You take air. You take in air to keep that spirit alive inside of you and keep you in constant consciousness as long as you live as a human being. Now, this consciousness via your pineal gland sets up for the human being their own personal universe, because you as a human being living on earth, you are connected via your pineal gland with the universe, with your personal universe, with the cosmic universe, the larger cosmic spiritual universe, which has no beginning and no ending. Okay? Now, if I cut your head open, I can see your brains, but I cannot see your mind. Your mind is invisible spirit. That's your personal universe. You see? If you know how to use your personal universe, which you're using it every day, whether you realize it or not, that personal consciousness coming from your personal awareness by way of consciousness, spiritual consciousness, creates for you, the human being, your own personal life. This is your life that you create within inside of your spiritual consciousness, within inside of your universe, your personal universe. Now, one has to also be taught that there are close to 7 billion other human beings walking this earth, of all races, creeds, and color. Everybody is trying to do the same thing, breathe in air and keep themselves alive. They too have their own personal universe. So therefore, the number of people walking this earth of all races, creeds, and color, which is close to 7 billion, they also have their own personal universe that they're dealing with. So in other words, everything that you see around you was once invisible. Everything that you see around you was invisible at one time. But from the minds of either a male or female come forth in physical form everything that you see around you. Okay? Now, that individual are known, or human beings as an individual are known as little creators. Okay? Now, we as little creators, male and female, can create and have created everything that you see around you in its physical form, except for the sky, the stars, the moon, the sun, air, water, earth, vegetation, animals, and humanity. Okay? A man and a woman singularly cannot create anything with life in it, because as you look around, you'll see the things coming out of their minds, but it has no life to it. See? It has no life. The life comes when the two, the male and the female, have a sexual union. And from that union comes procreation, comes life. But singularly, by themselves, they cannot create anything with life in it other than that form of togetherness to bring forth procreation. See? Now, everyone is in consciousness as a human being. That means that if you're alive, you are conscious. And from that consciousness that you are aware of, everything that you learn or see or hear or whatever the case might be comes into your consciousness. From your consciousness goes into your subconsciousness. So your consciousness and your subconscious mind are one and the same. Where are your subconscious mind? The subconscious mind is right here in your stomach area. The same area where your mother incubated you for 9 months. In other words, this is you're storing information consciously and subconsciously. They work side by side or with each other. So these are the things that needs to be taught to the human being. And every human should be taught that whatever they make up their mind that they want to do or want to achieve, they can achieve it. All they have to do is make up their mind, because they are already automatically in contact with the universe, like our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. They were in contact with the universe. The universe was their teacher. The universe taught them how to build the Great Pyramid, how to build the Great Springs, how to bring forth all of civilization from their culture and giving it to and for the rest of the people living throughout the world. Okay? Every person living throughout the world today, no matter what race, creed, or color that they may be, are using something from the culture of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, because they were the first and oldest civilized people on planet Earth. So from that culture that they created over there in the continent of Africa, from that culture came civilization. And they were taught by the universe with the connection that they had with their cosmic, in tune, spiritual mind. And the universe taught them. So therefore, there's no other prior older civilization than the ancient Egyptians. So you can't say, well, the ancient Egyptians got this from another older civilization. No. The universe taught them. Okay? That's where you get the word university from, because of the universe teaching our ancestors, using them as human instruments, just like each human, their mother and father are used as, and were used as human instruments. The same thing with the universe using our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, as human instruments to bring forth all of civilization for all of humanity. This is what an individual should be taught as a child growing up, as they modulate through the age development of their life. Then they should be taught this, and so they can not fall into pitfalls or the traps of religion, because anytime an individual go to church and sit up in the pews of a church, he is giving all of his spiritual power away to a dead image on a cross called Jesus the Christ. And this is what has to be taught to the human being, because everything that a human need or needed at the time of their birth, they was given it spiritually. Everything that you need was given to you spiritually at the time of your birth. So you don't need a religion. Man created a religion. You wasn't born with a religion. There's nothing on your birth certificate that says that you're a Christian. There's nothing on a birth certificate that says that you're a Muslim or a Jew or Black Hebrew Israelite or Buddhist or Hindu or etc., etc. Nothing on that that says that you are, and your humanity is tied up into any kind of religion. So these are the things that should be taught to the human being, and teach that human being that they could incubate their thoughts, and those thoughts will eventually, if they work, they have to work at it now. They just can't take in a thought, say, I want a car, and then thinking that a car is going to appear at the curb for them. No, it's not going to do that. You're going to have to take that thought into your conscious mind, work it with your subconscious mind. It's going to do that automatically. And then you're going to have to ideas, because you have now decided what you want to manifest in your life. Because, like I mentioned before, about your own personal universe. And from that personal universe that you possess as a human being, you can create your own world. So now, at this moment, you as a human being, you are in need of a car, for instance. Okay? And then you decide what kind of car you want. And you begin to manifest and bring this car into your life, or a car into your life. But you have to do some work. You got to follow your mind. your first mind. You got to follow hunches. You got to follow ideas will pop in your head of how you, the human being, can get a car. So you have to teach our children how to use their own personal humanity by telling them and teaching them and developing that ideology into their everyday life. Okay? So this is what has to be taught before you can teach anybody anything. It's about your own personal humanity. Who am I as a human being? That's very, very key. And once they know who they are as a human being, then development began to set in place. But it's very detrimental to teach that child about a religion without telling that child and teaching that child who they are as human beings. And if you know these things I'm talking about, then you won't ever need a religion, because you wasn't born with a religion. You were born with an indwelling divine spiritual birthright. You were born with power of life, your personal power. And why give it away to any man-made religion? So this is what has to be taught to humans throughout the world.
Professor Williams, you mentioned the ancient Egyptians. Now, when you talk about the ancient Egyptians, I'm presuming that you're talking about Nile Valley civilization. What are you talking about in terms of its territory and its people? Who are included in ancient Egyptian civilization?
Okay, when you deal with the Nile Valley civilization, as it is known today, you're dealing with Ethiopia, the Sudan, Egypt, and from the Sudan came the Nubians, out of Gondola in the Sudan. So today you got 4 names that you're dealing with that made up what is known as the Nile Valley civilization. You got the Ethiopians, the Sudanese, you got the Nubians, and you got the ancient Egyptians. All one and the same. Today they have separated those areas and renamed those areas to cause the confusion. But during the time of antiquity, which is ancient times, that whole area was considered and called the Nile Valley, thereby producing a civilization coming from the Nile Valley and called the Nile Valley civilization. And the ancient Egyptians served as the foundation for that Nile Valley civilization. I always use the term under one umbrella. It was called the ancient Egyptian Commonwealth, Divine Commonwealth, which was all under one umbrella. And today they call it the Nile Valley civilization.
What would be its territory boundaries?
The boundaries would be Ethiopia, the Sudan, and of course Egypt. And then you got the countries across North Africa. All that was under the umbrella of the ancient Egyptian Divine Commonwealth, which include Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, etc., etc.
Now, would those have been black African people, or would they look similar to the Euro-Asian type that's there today?
No, of course not. We're talking about the continent of Africa. Okay, we're talking about during the time of antiquity, ancient times. No Europeans, no known Europeans were in Africa during the time of antiquity. All Africans, okay? Total Africans. You see,
Black people.
Well, if you want to use the term black, I call them Africans. So when you use the term African or African, then you know that these people are Africans with dark skin. I don't use the term black, and I have a reason for that. But Africans are dark-skinned people.
I think Professor Williams said it's important for our young people, especially African young people, to understand what the contributions of ancient Egypt was. And as far as your research shows you, what was ancient Egypt like culturally and spiritually before Greek or European penetration? I want you to look at their value system, for example, their educational system, their politics, their technology. What is it that they bequeath to civilization? And if you want me to, I can break these questions up and ask them to you one by one, but could you begin?
Okay, the question is that what was ancient Egypt like before the Greeks and the Europeans came into Egypt? We're talking about a civilization beginning, let's say, 10,000 BC. The world's first and oldest civilized people on planet Earth, known to us today in history as the ancient Egyptians. There was no other prior older civilization than ancient Egypt. Okay, so one has to really understand that. So let's go inside of ancient Egypt a little bit. At this time, like I mentioned before, that they were used as human instruments to bring forth all of civilization for the whole entire world. Meaning that everything that is you use today, pen, paper, ink, furniture, buildings, eating utensils, cosmetics, music, and you name it, they were the creators and inventors of these different entities. So civilization was being built and structured and developed there. In other words, they brought forth animal husbandry, domesticating the earth, domesticating animals, architecture, building of buildings, mathematics. They were the only people living on planet Earth that were literate. And they were the only people by them have created mathematics as a workable discipline. They were able to build homes, houses, buildings, etc., etc. So they were the first people to live in and build homes or houses or buildings, simply because they knew math. In order to build a house or building or whatever the case might be, you have to know mathematics. So without the knowledge of mathematics, you cannot build anything. So they were the creators of mathematics, all forms of math. So therefore, and they, by them being the first to develop a writing system, they had three forms of writing. One, the meta-nature hieroglyphics, which has never ever been deciphered. And then they had the hieratic, demotic, cursive, phonetic script, which is the alphabet. And once an alphabet is created, it can only be created one time. That's it. So during the time of antiquity, our ancestors, ancient Egyptians, living in the continent of Africa, in Egypt, were the only literate people on planet Earth. No other race of people had a writing system. So therefore they were illiterate. I'm not using that to degrade them. I'm just bringing out a fact. And if that fact is true, then it stands for itself. Okay? So these things I have mentioned are part of the things that was going on there. Of course, you know, and the whole world know that they built the Great Pyramid, which is still standing today. They don't know how the Great Pyramid was built. It's a mystery. They built the Sphinx, which the body of a Sphinx is 1 city block long, 6 stories tall. Okay. In other words, they had amazingly large minds, meaning that their thinking was big. Okay. There was nothing to limit them. There was no religion, because religion put you in bondage, put you into slave servitude position. It limits your thinking, destroys your thinking. You can't think because all religions have rules and laws and rituals and customs for one to abide by. So that limits the individual. The ancient Egyptians didn't have all of that. They had the underlying principles of Ma'at, which is truth, justice, peace, love, and wisdom. This is what they had. This is the principle that they govern themselves by, you see. And the ancient Egyptians did not have armies. There was no army in ancient Egypt, nor jails, because they had no corrupt government. Armies are used to invade other people, take their land, take their culture, rape their women, take their natural resources, let's say dominate them, colonize them. That wasn't even in their thinking. So therefore, they coexisted with all races of people as they came in encounter with them throughout the world. Okay? So therefore, they had no army nor jails because their government was not corrupted. See, they didn't have a corrupt government. In order to have, if you have a corrupt government, then that government needs jails to put people in because they're going to break the law. See, so they didn't have all that in ancient Egypt. See, so that they were spiritually free of all these entanglements of religion and different other politics that was based off of greed, and et cetera, et cetera. See, now you take the European now, on the other hand, while we at this point in our interview, the European on the other hand used the foundation of our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, to build themselves an institution on. This was done after Alexander the Greek came into Egypt.
But what period are we talking about then?
We're talking about 332 BC when Alexander the Greek came into Egypt.
And how old at that time was the Egyptian, with the ancient Egyptian civilization?
Over 9,000 years.
So the ancient Egyptian civilization was 9,000 years old before the Europeans came in.
Before the Europeans ever set foot into Egypt and to the continent of Africa. They had a civilization that had been in existence for over 9,000 years.
That's the ancient
Egyptian. We're talking about the world's first and only civilized people.
What was happening in Europe at that time 9,000 years ago?
It is unknown simply because the Europeans will tell you, if you study European history, so far as trying to find the origin of it, they will tell you that their beginning origin for themselves, Europeans, is unknown. They started their beginning history with the Greeks. This is what they start their beginning history with the Greeks. So after coming into Egypt, you see, that's when their European civilization really began. Then you can begin to document it now. 332 BC, when Alexander came into Egypt, that's the beginning of European history. Prior to that, they'll tell you they don't know no origin, beginning history for themselves. They said that their history started with the Iliad and the Odyssey created by Homer. Now, there's never been a Homer, okay? Like there's never been Herodotus. There's never been Euripides. There's never been a Pythagoras. There's never been a Solon. There's never been a Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. All of these names.
Why do you say that? Because these are the names that Europeans use to ground and anchor their history. And you're saying they don't exist, but yet they have books supposedly that were written by these men.
They put that out in their institutions during the time of the Second Renaissance period. The Second Renaissance period of Europe started in the 16th century. That's the age of learning.
For the Europeans.
For the Europeans. And in their institutions, they created what is known as history. The subject and the discipline known today as history was created right there. And it is stated that whoever writes history controls history. So what they did, they put themselves into and created a pseudo-pigrapher history for themselves. The word pseudo-pigrapher means false and fictitious. So they created a Socrates. They created a Plato. They created an Aristotle, with the Aristotle being the teacher of Alexander. And Alexander built a library to house Aristotle's many hundreds of books that he was supposed to have written, which is all based off of a lie. And I can prove it. I'm going to prove it right in a few minutes, a few seconds. They said that Herodotus was the father of history, okay? And they said that Euripides wrote Greek tragedies. Then they say Hippocrates and Hippocrates and was the father of medicine, etc., etc. And they said that Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, all of these names I just mentioned are listed by way of a historical date, a supposed historical date, prior to the 4th century. See, most of these names I call 5th century created characters in European pseudo-pigrapher history, false and fictitious history, except for Homer, comes out of 9th century. So all of these names...
Comes out of when?
9th century.
9th century?
He was supposed to be 800, so that's the 9th century.
Okay, that's BC.
BC. So now, I'm going to show you how you get rid of these names and expose these names as being a lie. It's because the question that Walter Williams asked, if all of these names I've mentioned existed as human beings and not characters, then the question I ask is what alphabet is, because the Greeks had no alphabet. Had no alphabet prior to coming into ancient Egypt. See? So what alphabet did they use? What alphabet did Socrates use? What alphabet did Plato use? What alphabet did Aristotle use to write so many hundreds of books? What alphabet did Euripides use to write Greek tragedies? What alphabet did Herodotus use to write history for the Europeans? What alphabet did Homer use to write with? What alphabet did Pythagoras and Hippocrates use and Solon use to write with? They had none. See, so when the Greeks under Alexander, I'll tell you how a Greek alphabet was created. When the Greeks coming into Egypt under Alexander the Greek forced the Greek language on our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, they applied, by them being a literate people, they applied an alphabet to that language. And the alphabet that they applied is a phonetic alphabet, because the phonetic alphabet is a very important alphabet, because you can write and put an alphabetical value to the sounds that you hear. You see? So they learned the Greek language and began to apply an alphabet to the Greek language. So the Greek language had an alphabet applied to, but the Greeks had no alphabet because they were illiterate.
The Greeks had no writing system?
None whatsoever.
They couldn't write?
Couldn't read, couldn't write. If you can't write, you can't read. So therefore, there's never been, during the time of antiquity now, ancient times, there was never an institution that ever came out of Greece. None whatsoever, because they didn't have no writing system. You see?
Now, let me just ask you to digress for a moment in terms of the rest of Europe. Were the Greek civilization and culture any different from the rest of Europe? Say if you look into what today is England and Germany and Scandinavia, was the Greek civilization the same as as those civilizations?
All uncivilized. That's the same. Because today, the Europeans use Greece and the Greeks as a prototype civilization, supposed civilization for all of Europe. So if the Greeks was uncivilized and illiterate, then all of Europe was uncivilized and illiterate. See?
Can you give me the boundaries of Africa during ancient times, just so we know what is encompassed in the territory of Africa, what we're talking about? I mean, what was the boundaries of Africa? It's not the same today as it was in ancient times.
It's not the same today because the world has been remapped by the Europeans. Okay, but let's go back to ancient times. The map that is being used today to identify the whole continent of Africa, let's take, for instance, use that map as a visual. Then, along with that map, you go over in Northeast Africa, and you come to the country, and the countries that we know today as Turkey, we know today as Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and
Israel.
Well, I don't count Israel because that's an illegal state that never supposed to have existed, but is there, so I ignore that. So all of that area over there is considered Northeast Africa, misnomer today and called the Middle East. They made it the land of the Bible. That goes into another history. But if you take the original map of Africa and put all those other countries that I named, Turkey and Arabia and Yemen, et cetera, with that, that's the whole picture of Africa. Territory of Africa.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were talking about the Europeans having no writing system and being illiterate people, and that the Greeks, the Africans, the ancient Egyptians applying an alphabet, the phonetic script, to their language. Please continue.
Yeah, so today as a misnomer, people are taught that the Greeks had an alphabet. They never had no alphabet. It's a misnomer. And then from the Greek alphabet, they said, came the Latin. And then from the Greek and the Latin alphabet came the Hebrew alphabet. There's no such thing as a Hebrew alphabet. All alphabets come from one source. And that's our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, who lived in the continent of Africa. Okay? And so even the Jewish religion now is claiming an alphabet with those large black calligraphied letters that they use to write what they call Hebrew. And prior to Hebrew coming in, they use those same calligraphied large black block letters to write Yiddish. You see, so one has to know something about their relationship with the ancient Egyptians, our ancestors. They have to know something about that. If they don't, then the whole world can fool them. They can tell them anything, you see. And once there was William A. Bennett, who used to be the Secretary of Education, said that to be ignorant of history is to be fundamentally like a child, you see, because anybody can come and tell you anything.
I want to draw your attention back to these European writers that you were proving did not exist. Socrates and all of these, Plato, all of these supposedly ancient European personalities are fictitious. Can you continue developing your position on that?
Well, I've said just about everything that should be said to an individual's understanding about those names never existed. Those names are incarnated names. Mm-hmm. And how does one incarnate a name is that they create a name, mm-hmm. make a body for it, and put flesh on it. Mm-hmm. And how they make a body for it, after creating the name and putting flesh on that body, is by stories attached to it. They attach a story to it. Mm-hmm. And they put it in a book, teach it as part of the curriculum of a school system. Mm-hmm. They may put it in the Bible, mm-hmm. that they teach people is the Word of God and not to question it. Mm-hmm. And so they put these different incarnated names where they will be exposed to the minds of the people throughout the world. And these names, such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, etc., is no exception. You see? So these are incarnated names. They invented names. They write through these names. They say, oh, Socrates did so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And then they put a birth date for Socrates, a death date for Socrates, and then sometimes they even put their mother's name or the son of name or their father's or whatever the case might be to make it real in the minds of the people. Now, once an individual read and they believe that there was Socrates, mm-hmm. even though there's never been a human being walking this earth by the name of Socrates, but if the people who read this and has been taught that there was a Socrates, a Plato, who Socrates is supposed to be the teacher of Plato, Plato supposed to be the teacher of Aristotle, etc., and Aristotle is supposed to have taught Alexander the Greek, and Alexander the Greek built a library called the Great Library to house Aristotle's books. And as long as you believe those stories, mm-hmm. then what the individual human being has done, they have created in their minds and given life to Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and to Herodotus, and so forth and so on. You see, that's the key, and that's the reason why they have created these names to make. We're talking about the Europeans, create these names and put it into their curriculum in their school system to give them, the Europeans, to the rest of the world, some semblance of being civilized, mm-hmm. or a learned people. Mm-hmm. You see, that's the reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brother Walter, we were talking about the culture of ancient Egypt, their value system, how they treated one another, how they lived in relationship to whether they killed, whether they stole, in general, how they. But in your explanations, when we got to talking about the Europeans, you mentioned something about the land of the Bible, that Africa in ancient times had a much vaster territory, which today is called the land of the Bible. Can you talk about how the Bible impacted that land, or how that land was created to verify that there was a Bible? But can you speak on that?
What part do you want me to speak on?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me get at it this way. In your opinion, Brother Walter, what is your opinion about the Bible? That's the way I'll open this up. What is your opinion about the Bible?
The Bible is a book that has no historical work whatsoever. 99 9/10 of every name that's listed or spoke of in the Bible never existed as human beings, only characters. And like I mentioned to you before, they teach the Bible to the masses of people throughout the world, the Christians, etc., that this is the Word of God. And with the fear that they instill in the minds of the believers about the Bible being the Word of God. That's fear. Do not question the Bible. So they don't question the Bible. Whatever's in the Bible, whatever the Bible is saying, they take it face value and say, this is the truth. Now what the people who read the Bible and believe in these stories, they make these stories real because they use their own personal spiritual power that was given to them at the time of their birth to do that, to do just that. You see? For instance, in my lectures I give, I ask people, have you ever heard of the story of Nebuchadnezzar? They say yes. Nebuchadnezzar, the story goes, went into Judea in 587 BC and took the Jews out of Judea, which is Jerusalem today, and took them into Babylon and put them into captivity there. Then it goes on to say with this story, Cyrus II, the Persian king, in 536, went into Babylon and freed the Jews and sent them back to Judea to build their second temple. This is what the story is being told and preached from the pulpits of churches around the world. Now, if a parishioner sitting in the pews of a church takes the story in, read the story, listen to this story, if they believe that Nebuchadnezzar, that there was a Nebuchadnezzar, and that this Nebuchadnezzar in 587 went into Judea to get Jews out of Judea to take them into Babylon and put them into captivity, then that believer that believes the story have created a Jew in their minds and created Nebuchadnezzar. And the rest of the names that are attached to this story. They do that with their own personal spirituality. They give it life, in other words. You see? So this is how the Bible, this is one way the Bible is being used. Like I said before, the Bible has no historical worth because 99 9/10 of every name that's listed in the Bible never existed as human beings. It is a book that's based off of mythology, fiction, allegories, and metaphors, etc., etc. So then one has to know some history about this Bible.
Yes.
You just can't go and pick up a Bible and start believing in it. See? If so, then you're going to get disappointed. I asked the question, when was the first Bible ever printed on planet Earth? Printed on planet Earth. I asked that question to people. I asked that question to ministers. They can't answer. I asked that question, when was the first printed Bible ever printed on planet Earth? What country was it printed in? What city in that country was it printed in? What alphabet was used to print that Bible? What material was used to formulate the printing of that Bible? Where did this material come from? Who formulated this material for the Bible to be printed? And what was the orthodox name of the Bible? Very important questions. So if an individual don't have the answers for that, then they know nothing about the Bible. Okay? So then I asked the individual, when was the Old Testament, that we know today is the Old Testament, and the New Testament put up on the one cover? They can't answer that question. Okay? The third question I asked him, I said, now in your Bible that you read, who created the New Testament? Who was the first person on earth to propound in the creation? Propound.
Okay.
The creation of the New Testament. What was the orthodox name? What year was it propounded? What was the orthodox name of this propounded New Testament? How many Gospels was produced in this first New Testament ever presented on planet Earth? Okay? And the writer and the creator of the New Testament, how many other and more manuscript was added from this individual's writing. The fourth question I asked him, when did the fourth gospel come into existence? Who created the fourth gospel? And what book was it put in? Etc., etc. So if you don't know all these things, then you know nothing about the Bible. You're just sitting up in a church, going along with the program. Because when an individual go to church and sit in the pews of a church, he don't have to think. He or she does not have to think. Okay? You go into a church, you sit there with your belief and your faith. See? And you go there because belief and faith doesn't give you knowledge. Don't give you no knowledge. You're just sitting up there believing. Yes, going on. Yes, Reverend. You see, Reverend is in the same position that you're in. See, he's a believer too. He don't know anything about the Bible that he's preaching from. Because he can't answer these questions that I just brought forth and said that this is what I ask ministers and people who are going to bring to me about the Bible. See?
Well, let me begin trying to unravel some of this mystery by throwing out some of the things that people believe, and perhaps you can begin to give some corrections. People believe that the Old Testament was written by Moses, and they believe that there were ancient scrolls and manuscripts which somehow was saved, passed down, and in fact they believe that some of these scrolls were recently discovered, I think somewhere in Israel not too long ago. Can we begin by unraveling perhaps the Moses mystery and how the Bible took its shape?
Okay, now the Bible, the first 5 books of Moses was written by Moses, Maimonides, called Maimon. Moses Maimon called Maimonides. Yes, written by Moses, but not the Moses of the Bible. That's still discrepancy. See, this is where your knowledge of knowing human history comes in. You see? Now, in 1999, there was an article in the Chicago Sun-Times, and they were writing up an article about the Oriental Institute on the campus of the University of Chicago. There's a museum there called the Oriental Institute. They had closed for 2 or 3 years, and they remodeled it and they opened it back up. And so they had a article written in the Sun-Times about the opening of the Oriental Institute. And in that same article, they had a little section in there that says little known facts about Egypt. And this is what they said. They said there's, even though scholars continue to search, they cannot find any evidence of a Moses being in Egypt. They cannot find any evidence of 10 biblical plagues ever occurred or happened in Egypt. They said that the Exodus did not happen. Very powerful. The Exodus did not happen. Find no evidence of that. And the fourth thing is said that slaves did not build the pyramid. Okay? Now, let's go back. The religion called Judaism, as has been stated and written and taught today, that Moses created the religion called Judaism. Okay? Now, the story goes that Moses was put into a basket as a baby by his mother. And she put that baby in the basket called Moses, and it floated down the Nile River until it got to Egypt, and the Pharaoh's daughter, this is how the story goes now.
Yes.
retrieved that basket and took the baby Moses out and raised the baby Moses in the house of the Pharaoh. Until baby Moses got to be an adult and he saw what the old evil Pharaoh was doing to his people, the Hebrews or the Israelites, whatever you want to call them. And there was a rebellion there. And that rebellion caused 10 biblical plagues to come down on ancient Egypt by God. And that the Israelites, fleeing from the Pharaoh, ran to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea rolled back, and they was able to cross on dry land into the Promised Land. This is how the story goes now. Okay? So today, they're saying, Western academia is saying, and the Jewish scholars are saying, that this never happened. They have no evidence of that. So therefore, without a Moses floating down the Nile River in a basket as a baby and taken out of the basket by Pharaoh's daughter, etc., etc., as the story goes, this makes the religion called Judaism collapse. Because they don't have there's no Moses. Then you said that the religion called Judaism was created by Moses as a religion, then it is predicated on Moses floating down the Nile River, though. See, very, very key. So they say Western academia and the Jewish community are saying they have no evidence of that. Okay? So that takes care of that. Then the Jews practice a ritualistic custom called the Passover every year. The Passover is predicated on 10 biblical plagues being put upon ancient Egypt, and the Exodus, and slaves building the pyramid. That's what it is predicated on, along with Moses. So they said, Western academia and Jewish community are saying there's no Moses, have no evidence of a Moses, have no evidence of no 10 biblical plagues ever being put upon ancient Egypt. The Exodus did not occur. Very key. The Exodus, I'm going to say it again. They said that the Exodus did not occur. And slaves did not build a pyramid.
Now, when
did not build a pyramid. So therefore, that makes the Passover invalid, which they practice every year. Becomes invalid because you got to have the Exodus. You got to have the Jews building the pyramid. And you got to have the 10 biblical plagues coming upon ancient Egypt in order for you to have a ritualistic ceremony and customs that is in the religion called Judaism today. They practice that every year. So they said that these things never happen, so that makes that Passover invalid.
Now, when you say they say, who is the they?
Western academia.
Now, that's a broad signature, Western academia.
Okay, the word Western means European.
Yes.
That's what that means. Academia means they're learning, they're institutions. They're learning institutions. So from European learning institutions, along with, which includes Jewish scholars in those institutions holding down chairs, departments.
Can you name any of them?
Well, you take like Israel Finkelstein over there in the illegal state of Israel. Zeev Herzog over there in the illegal state of Israel. You got William Deaver from Arizona State University. Men like that, you see. So they're out there. Then you got S. David Sperling from New York, who teaches at the Hebrew Union College in New York, who wrote a book, very important. He wrote a very important book called The Original Torah. That book was published in 2000, the year 2000. And he wrote in his book, The Original Torah, S. David Sperling wrote in his book and said, there's no There's never been any Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Sarah, Gideon, Esau, David, Solomon, or Joshua. And he said, don't stop there. All the characters in the Bible, like I mentioned before, never existed as human beings, just biblical characters. Put it into the minds of the people. And if the people believe that there was an Abraham, then Abraham becomes alive, because you, the human being, have made Abraham alive by your spiritual personal power. You see? So he is saying today that there's never been an Abraham. So if there's no Abraham, then that makes all three religions collapse. It makes Judaism collapse, Christianity collapse, it makes Islam collapse. Because without an Abraham, none of those religions can exist.
You were telling me that Western and Jewish scholars have themselves denounced that there was that these biblical characters ever existed. But you know, I've been to Israel. I've been to the land of the Bible, and they have, for an example, in the state of Israel, the legal state of Israel, as you call it, they have the temple there today, the Great Wall, the Wailing Wall. They took me everywhere where Jesus walked, where he met where he gave the Beatitudes on the mountain. They took me on the Sea of Jordan. Everywhere in the Bible, they took me. Now, how does this land of the Bible come about? Explain all this, because they actually are carrying thousands of people on pyramid. All these churches, all these black preachers are carrying black people over to reinforce that this white man on the cross actually lived, walked, and he's showing them where they crucified them and so forth and so on. Talk about that.
Well, see, that's all man-made. They made that for the people. Okay, just like Walt Disney made Disneyland for his characters, Mickey Mouse and so forth and so on. You see, so what I'm saying to you is that when you go over there, it's a funny thing that you got the three major religions all housed in one area. Jerusalem, they call it Jerusalem. Okay? You got the Wailing Wall there. Now that wall, historically, was part of a wall that when the Knights Templars was over there in Jerusalem, you see, in the 11th and 12th century, up into the 13th century, latter part of the 13th century, they built a double wall city within the perimeter of Jerusalem. And when the Knights Templars was run out in 1291 by the Mamelukes of Egypt, that wall began to crumble and so forth and so on. So they made part of that and kept part of that wall, okay, for a reason. They knew that they was going to make that area the land of the Bible or a tourist attraction. They knew that. They knew that right after World War I. World War I was 1914 to 1918. So right after that, they began to, they renamed that area the Middle East, which is a misnomer name. They made it the land of the Bible. So that's all planned for that, okay? So when you go over there, for the Christians, they got the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Okay? For the Muslims, they got the Dome of the Rock. For the Jews, they got the Wailing Wall. All that's done on purpose. They went over there and began to build and put in whatever the Bible said should be over in that area. by way of the stories in the Bible. They created that for the attraction of these believers in these various religions. That's done on purpose.
Now, let's continue to dissect this Bible. We were talking about Moses, and you said something about Moses Maimonides, and I presume you were making reference to how the book of Moses came about. Is Moses Maimonides the author of the 5 books of Moses? And if so, when, where, and why?
Moses Maimon, called Maimonides, is the author and the creator of the first 5 books of Moses.
How did it come about?
He began to write it in 1168 and he finished it in 1180, 12 years. Okay? Moses Maimon, called Maimonides, was born in Spain. And he got run out, his family got run out of Spain. And he fled into Egypt. Okay? In the meantime, he was influenced by Rashi, the writings of Rashi, Solomon Bar Isaac, called Rashi. Okay? Who wrote, Rashi created the Learned of Zion, that book. Okay? Between 1080 and 1100. Created that. This book that is out today called The Learned Elders of Zion. Okay? And that book, written by Rashi, Solomon Bar Isaac, called Rashi, because he was a rich baron in France. He was his family owned vineyards over there. So he created a code between other rich barons and merchants.
Code?
A code.
Okay.
Of how to treat non-barons, or how to treat the public in general, who, let's say, poor. Okay? How to conduct themselves, what to do, etc. See? So he created that book. And that book was also used by his grandson, Jacob ben Meir. Okay? And then you go up to the time of Moses Maimon, which Rashi and Moses Maimon, there's a 100-year difference. Rashi was born in 1040. Okay? Died 1104. Moses Maimonides was born 1135 and died 1205. You see? So from that book, The Learned Elders of Zion, Moses Maimonides used that as a guideline, and he created the first 5 books of Moses. This was done because he knew that people would begin to read his writings. And he also put out a book called Guide to the Perplexed, meaning that the Guide to the Perplexed, meaning that after a person reads his writings, they are confused. You see, because his writings was written for the sole purpose of being abstruse. The word abstruse means it was written for the reader or nobody to understand it. It was written on purpose for you not to understand it. The Bible is written on purpose for you and nobody else to understand, on purpose by Moses Maimonides. See? So that's the reason why he came out with the follow-up after writing his first 5 books. Guide to the Perplexed, to try to guide you through some of this foolishness that he written. Now, mind you, he went and lived for a while among the Knights Templars over there in Jerusalem. That's where he left his writings with, so to speak. And that's how his writings were able to be used today, because it was kept within the secret society of the Knights Templars until a certain time in history.
Who were the Knight Templars?
The Knights Templars were soldiers that were a part of the army of Godfrey of Bouillon and his brother Baldwin. Godfrey of Bouillon and his brother Baldwin were students of Rashid. They all came out of France. See? And Rashid, like I told you, was a rich vineyard, wine, grape growing producer in France. He helped finance, or he financed the army of Godfrey and his brother Baldwin during the time of the Crusades. So in 1099, Godfrey and Baldwin were now over there in Turkey, meeting with Alexius I Comnenus, who was the Byzantine ruler at that time. And we're talking about 1099 now. And then the meeting with Alexius I Comnenus was to brief all crusading armies that came over there to supposedly save Christendom, which goes into another history. But it was actually to save the Byzantine Empire. He said that, this is Alexius I talking to the crusading army, and we're talking about, at this time, Godfrey and his brother Baldwin. He said, whatever land that you confiscate from the Seljukian Turks, whatever land, because see, the Seljukian Turks had erupted out of Iran in 1071 and took up a lot of land territory ruled by the Byzantine Empire. And said, whatever land you can confiscate and win back, give it back to the empire, the Byzantine Empire. But that's not what they intended to do. So Godfrey and his brother Baldwin went into Jerusalem, conquered Jerusalem in 1099. And in that crusading army of Godfrey and his brother Baldwin came out of that the Knights Templars, because they were soldiers and part of that army. So in 1118, they began to formulate for themselves an ideology and laws and rituals that are known as the Knights Templars. And 10 years later, 1128, they got a charter for themselves and got emblems and had emblems for themselves. That compass, see, is their insignia. That compass that they use as a insignia is also a double pyramid, which became the Star of David. You see, if you go to Washington, D.C., in the Washington Monument, you'll find on each level in that monument, you'll find Knights Templars insignias. And they all lead back to the 12 tribes of Israel. See, so that's a little something on the Knights Templar, without elaborating a whole lot, but that's the beginning of it. of the Knights Templar, they became a secret society. And they stayed over there, paying what is known in history as a Dhimmi tax. Dhimmi, D-H-I-M-M-I, a Dhimmi tax. Because in 1187, Saladin took back to control of Jerusalem from the Knights Templar, who was occupying it. See, and the Knights Templars had built a wall around Jerusalem, like I mentioned before. And when Saladin in 1187 took back Jerusalem, they stayed within the confines of that wall and did not bother anyone because they paid to those Arabs, those Turks over there, a Dhimmi tax to stay there, a real estate tax. Okay? Until the Mamelukes came along in 1291 and ran them out of there.
Ran the Templars out?
Templars out.
The Mamelukes ran the Templars out?
The Mamelukes of Egypt ran them out.
Okay.
You see, and they began to flee out of there. You see? And so, you know, they went into various places. They went into Rhodes. They went into Scotland. And they went elsewhere along the Mediterranean, those countries along the Mediterranean. So you're scattered.
Now, Walter, Brother Walter, when you talk of the Knights Templars, you are talking about a system that was created using the Knights Templar that ultimately developed into our monetary system today. And I would like for you to deal with that, looking at how it developed and how it became centralized into the money controllers that we have today. Can you develop the money system that that we use today in terms of interest, in terms of taxes, and etc.?
Okay.
Can you begin? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, we on camera?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you had cut it off.
No.
Okay. Anyway, to answer your question, one has to start with the Lombards. That's very key. In order to deal with any monetary conversation about money, you have to start with the Lombards, who came out of Germany, who originated in Germany in 543. Okay? And from Germany they came into Hungary. And from Hungary they came into the north of Italy with their leader, who was Albion, A-L-B-I-O-N. That was a leader of the Lombards. The Lombards, while in Italy, began to marry into wealthy families. They began to control, eventually, all of the commerce of Italy. They also began to control all of the natural resources in Italy. Okay? Now, with that being said, the rich monarchs and rulers over there, they use coin money, gold and silver. The Lombards changed that. They changed the money system into paper money with a usury tax, which is, the word usury means a interest. Okay? They began banking as we know it today, a banking system. The first bank was in Italy, using paper money with a usury tax.
In other words, an IOU.
Well, yeah, IOU plus a tax.
Yes.
Otherwise, if I loan you $1 and I'm charging you 10% interest, then you owe me $11. See,
Okay.
See, so forth and so on. So that first bank was in the north of Italy, And then they moved the banking system into France, in the north of France, with the usury tax. So that's the beginning of and the foundation of the banking system or the banking industry. You have to start with the Lombards.
Okay.
Now, these rich monarchs who control different land territories began to borrow money from the Lombards, from those banks. Okay? And the rich Lombards, in order to pay back that money with the usury tax, with that interest on that, they began to tax the people under their domain, under their rulership. And the tax collector for the Lombards was the Knights Templars. They was their agents. They were called the bankers now. See? And as you remember, Jesse Jackson got in trouble when he called the Jews of New York Hymies, or Hymie Town. See, so how do you spell Dhimmi? It's Dhimmi. If you take the D away,
it's Hymy.
It's Hymy. So you take the I and put a Y there. I and Y is one and the same. So that's the way that Hymy comes in. So these Knights Templars became tax collectors for them, for the banking system. See? So that's how, but you have to start with the Lombards. So today, you got the Federal Reserve, still owned by the Lombards. Now, the Lombards are still operating in London, England. They have a street today in London, England. It's supposed to be the crookedest street in the world. It's called Lombard Street. That's where all your banking houses are. See? And they created the Federal Reserve in 1913. And they created the Bank of England in 1690. And they own IMF, International Monetary Fund. They own that. They own the World Bank. You see, they got control of all your finances around the whole entire world. All started with the Lombards.
Now, is that still today, that monetary system controlled by the families and the descendants of the families that started it?
Some of it is, yeah, I would say yes, because it's passed down from generation to generation. But now you got that money system and the banking system and economic system has expanded. Other families are in there also, you see. So you got to trace the other entities that's controlling the money to see where that leads them by way of relationship. You take like the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers married into the Rothschild family. You see? So Rockefeller became an agent for the Rothschilds over in America, along with J.P. Morgan, along with Peabody, and so forth and so on. You see?
Now, how do the Rothschilds fit into the original bankers?
Well, they, like I said before, as time progressed, you got other people that's going to accumulate a fortune. You know, like Warren Buffett. You know, if he wanted to, he could fit into that program of bankers. Or Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. You see, so forth and so on. So you got people, you know, creating fortunes. You know, the Getty family, so forth and so on. All part of that conglomerate there. You know, but they have their own individual role to play. You know, you got the Bilderbergs today, who meet once a year at the hotel called the Bilderberg Hotel in Holland. All wealthy, rich, powerful men. You see, so but it all started. I'm trying to tell you where it started from. The origin of it started with the Lombards. So anybody want to study the monetary system of this world, you still have to start with the Lombards, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Brother Walker. But I need to get back to Maimonides and the Bible before people forget what we were talking about. Maimonides wrote the 5 books of Moses, in 1090?
No, 1168.
In 1168.
And he finished it 12 years later, 1180.
Now, how did that become incorporated into the Bible, in which preachers believe is the Word of God? How? Because preachers believe that there were ancient scrolls that were collected, and at some point these scrolls were then compiled together by a group of theologians to determine which were authentic and were not, and we end up with a Bible. But can you deal with that history of how the Bible really comes about?
Okay, now, the Bible was formulated by 3 men. I'm talking about the very beginning. Okay? Johannes Rushlin, Reuauchlin, Johannes Rushlin. Marcello Ficino and Pico della Mirandola. Now, Johannes Rushlin is from Germany. And the other two, Marcello Ficino and Pico della Mirandola, are from Italy. They collaborated using Moses Maimonides' writings that were in the Knights Templars' possession. See, because over there in Jerusalem, when the Knights Templars lived over there, they had preceptories over there. Meaning they had different little temples over there. And those different temples were being financed by rich merchants from Europe over there. Okay, but that's a different history. But anyway, these 3 men collaborated on the writings of Moses Maimonides, thus creating what is known then as the Hebrew Bible. Okay? Now, we're talking about 1475, this happened. Okay? And this Bible that was created by them in 1475, using the writings of Moses Maimonides, the Roman Catholic Church had no literature for their religion called Christianity. In 1475, 30 years prior to that, the Vatican was being built for the very first time, because the seat of Christianity had moved out of Constantinople, out of the Church of Hagia Sophia. That's the first seat of Christianity, out of Northeast Africa into Europe. And Eugenius IV and Nicholas V and others began to build over the catacombs on the outskirts of Rome by digging up all those bodies, building the Vatican, building St. Peter's Church. And the Vatican is nothing but a replica of the double-walled city of Constantinople. That's all it is. But getting back to the Bible. So these 3 men created this Bible using Maimonides' writings. And they call it the Hebrew Bible. And the Roman Catholic Church, like I mentioned, had no literature for their character. The character of Christianity is Jesus the Christ. They had no literature for that, for their religion. So, Johannes Rushlin told the Roman Catholic Church that this book is produced so the Christians can understand Christianity better. And the Roman Catholic Church went up into arms.
Went up into arms?
They was mad. They got mad. It was mad as hell. And along with this Hebrew Bible being created, Rushlin created what is known as he created a Latin version of that same Bible, because that Bible that Ruslan and Ficino and Marandola had produced was in Greek letters, and Ruslan created a Bible that was in Latin, and today it's called the Latin Vulgate. But they throw you off by saying that Jerome, using the Greek Septuagint, created the Latin Vulgate for the Roman Catholic Church. That's historically incorrect. It was Ruslan creating this Hebrew Bible for the very first time, along with his two Italian counterparts and contemporaries. He created what is known as the Latin Vulgate for the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? So this is how it was done.
Now, I'll get back to the New Testament in a minute, but when does Christianity evolve? Because you're saying that Christianity existed before this Bible was adapted by the Roman Catholic Church as its instrument of the focus of Jesus Christ. But the Christ figure had been being worshipped before the Romans in the 5th century. Perhaps maybe you can just kind of give us a rough overview of how of the involvement of Christianity, so that we just have something to kind of fall on. You have a picture there of Serapis. Can you kind of give us a rough overview of that? You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but at least so it's connected.
Okay. Now, this image that I'm showing you here, it's called Serapis on there, but it looks like Jesus Christ. You got to remember now, this image was created in 320 BC, using the image of Ptolemy I Lagi, who was the successor of Alexander the Greek, who died in 323 BC. 3 years later, this image was created for the successor of Alexander the Greek. Because, see, the Greeks knew, and the Romans knew, that in order to rule Egypt, they had to be accepted by the ancient Egyptian priest society, they were rejected out of that society because the ancient Egyptians did not allow any foreigners in their sacred society. They only handpicked their own kind to come in. Okay? So that's very important to understand. So, see, his name, the successor of Alexander the Greek, was named Ptolemy I Lagi, and he was called Soter, S-O-T-E-R, which means Savior. So now, that same Savior is applied to who? Jesus the Christ today. They said in his cult, he is spoken of as the Savior. Okay? They also said in his cult, he raises the dead. That's the same, those two names, or two things I just mentioned, are given as attributes to this Jesus Christ, the Savior and one who raises the dead. They also said that you will always be in the presence of Serapis, even after death. They say that today, at today's funerals, about this Jesus Christ. So old Moses has gone on to be with Jesus. See, so even after death, he's always going to be attached to you. So therefore, that came out of this image. So now, if an individual will read my book called The Historical Origin of Christianity, I will walk you through the progression of human history, of how that image came to be from Serapis, came to be Christ, and how Christianity first began. That image, what I just showed you, became Christ at the Council of Ephesus in 431. After the Melkite Coptic Egyptians went into the ancient Egyptian divine triad and took Isis out of there and created a created creature called the Virgin Mary. Because the Monophysites had protested, saying that this Serapis had no human nature, only an Osiris-like spirit, but no human nature. So in order to have to be a human being, you have to be born through the body of a female.
Correct.
There's no way you can become a human being.
Correct.
So what they did, these Melkites went into the ancient Egyptian divine triad of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and took Isis out of there. Gave Isis gave her components to this created creature, the Virgin Mary. Gave this Virgin Mary the attributes of Isis. And they also gave this created creature, the Virgin Mary, who's to become the mother of Serapis, supposedly giving this Serapis a human nature. They attached the title of Theotokos to this Virgin Mary. The word Theotokos means the mother of God. So they amalgamated the two created creatures together, Serapis and the created creature, the Virgin Mary, with this created title of Theotokos together. And now they said that after that was done, the Melkite Coptic Egyptians speaking Greek said that now this is the anointed one. This is the Christos. And then Christos in English means now this is the Christ. So 20 years later, at the Council of Chalcedon in 451, the argument was still going on whether this image had a human nature or not. In fact, that argument went on for 921 years. Okay, whether this image that we know today as Jesus Christ had a human nature or not. But if you don't study history, human history, you won't find that out. If you walk into a religion believing, that's very, very dangerous to believe in something that you know nothing about. Because belief does not give you knowledge. Faith does not give you knowledge. So you have to find these things out historically if you have to stay on the outside of these various religions and other subjects to learn what's going on inside historically. So at the Council of Chalcedon, they tried to eliminate the argument between the Monophysites and the Diaphysitics. The Monophysites, as I mentioned before, said that this Christ, now it was Christ then in 451, had no human nature but an Osiris-like spirit, but no human nature. The Diaphysitics, who believed in the two natures of Christ, the word Diaphysitic means one who believes in two natures of Christ, Osiris and a human nature. So what these Melkite Coptic Egyptians did at the Council of Chalcedon was to create two words, Persepon, which means a person. A person means a human being. And consubstantiality, which is the same thing, to try to establish a human element and a human essence for the created creature that we know today as Jesus the Christ. Now this created creature, Jesus Christ now, was created by our ancestors, Coptic Egyptians, but they was created for the Europeans, not for us, not for us Africans, or not for themselves.
Why would they create a Christ for the Europeans and not for themselves?
They don't. Who needs a Christ? Who needs something that never existed? Okay, they created this Christ. First, they created Serapis, who became Christ at the Council of Ephesus, like I mentioned before. And Christianity officially began at the close of the Council of Chalcedon in 451. But they created this image that we know today as Jesus Christ from the image of Ptolemy I, the successor of Alexander the Greek. Why? Because the Greeks wanted to be accepted by the ancient Egyptian priest society in order to rule Egypt. So they had to their image had to be accepted in those temples to be accepted alongside of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So that's what they wanted. So they created this image just for that purpose. I'm talking about the Melchite Coptic Egyptians. You see?
Did they voluntarily do that?
Well, I mean, if they did it for favors. It's like human nature. If I promise you a Cadillac, a big home, so many thousands of dollars, you do whatever I ask you to do. And this is what was done. See?
Did they do that under duress? I mean, if you tell me that the ancient Egyptians were governed by Ma'atian principles, and now you're telling me that they created Serapis for the European, which is a distortion of their Kemetic spirituality, why would they do that?
You said two key words. They practiced the Maothian Creed during the time of antiquity, which is ancient times. This is before the Europeans came into Europe now. They still practice that creed. But now once the Europeans are in there, they broke up that unity and that cohesiveness that was practiced among the ancient Egyptians prior to the Europeans coming in there. Once the Europeans got in there, they set up a different ball game set in place.
The Europeans set up a different.
That's right. And
how did they do that?
By their presence. Since the image of Serapis, this image here, was not accepted by our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, in their sacred society, Ptolemy I, Lagi, called Sota, closed all those temples down. You see? Thus cutting off the culture of our ancestors. Now, the Melchite Coptic Egyptians were Uncle Toms of antiquity. They went along with the Greeks. You see? But the rest of the ancient Egyptians did not. They rejected that image. Only a handful. Okay? And they went along with the Greeks, and they made, because the Greeks knew in order to rule Egypt, he had to be accepted by the priest society, the sacred society. He wanted his image to be in the temples alongside of Osiris and Isis and Horus and etc., etc. But they rejected this image. So Ptolemy closed all the temples down, confiscated all of their divine scroll monuments, and put it in one temple in Memphis, Egypt, where this image was created. Okay? So these Melchite Coptic Egyptians, I call the Uncle Toms of antiquity, created for this European, this image that we know today as Jesus Christ, and created the foundation for Christianity. All that was done for the Europeans, not for themselves.
Walter, can you begin to describe the changes that this brought about within the Egyptian worldview, the ancient Egyptian worldview? Start looking at the change and what happened to the ancient Egyptians who refused to accept that image as a divine image. I'm looking at the impact of Greeks now coming into Egypt. What impact did that have on the life and the culture and the spirituality of the Egyptians, and what happened to the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians?
What happened with the impact of the Europeans, beginning with the Greeks, coming into Egypt, is that now you have a different people coming in with a different culture. Okay? Now, the ancient Egyptians does not have a pure ancient Egyptian culture anymore because of the mixture of other people coming in, such as the Greeks and later the Romans, and the Greeks and the Romans are one and the same. So that's your first impact. Okay? The Greeks came in, didn't use an army, didn't have to use an army. Why? Because the ancient Egyptians did not have an army to resist their onslaught of invasion. Okay? The ancient Egyptians had no concept of warfare. They were not warlike people. Our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, were not warlike people. They were peaceful people. They were civilized people. And a highly civilized people does not dominate or kill or rape or diminish or steal and cut off other people's culture. They don't do that. So here come the Europeans in there. After Alexander came in there, then they came into Egypt in droves, coming out of the Balkan areas of Europe, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Yugoslavia, Albania, Hungary, Greece, and so forth and so on. And then they began to come out of the southern areas of Russia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Afghanistan, so forth and so on. They began to come into Northeast Africa. So that's how they got over there.
So you got thousands of Europeans now over a period of hundreds of years pouring into Egypt because it offers them abundance in food and civilization,
and resources.
Yes, kind of deal with that. Why they would continue and how the change is now. Are they intermarrying? Talk to us about it.
Well, let me tell you this. They also, not only did they come into Egypt and Northeast Africa and Turkey and so forth and so on, Iran and so forth, and Iraq and so forth, and Arabia, they also came using the Mediterranean from the Balkan areas of Europe, that I just mentioned. They also came into the countries along North Africa, such as Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, etc. You see. Did they marry each other? I would say no, because there was no custom for the ancient Egyptians never intermarried, because they went around the world civilizing other people and meeting other people, and they never intermarried those people, okay? Because it doesn't show up in their artwork, okay? So I would say no. Now, of course, you're going to have some Greeks going to impregnate African ancient Egyptian women. You know, that's going to happen. But so far as a mass intermarriage, no. It's not in their custom. They didn't do that. Okay?
But what happened to the ancient Egyptians as these Europeans are pouring in? Where did they go?
The ancient Egyptians stayed over there in that area. It's called Egypt. Some of them went into different parts of Africa. Okay? But, so we're talking about during the time of antiquity. They went into different parts of Africa. They stayed into different parts of Africa. They lived in different parts of Africa. But still in all, Egypt was being occupied by these Europeans. Okay? And this is what you have to begin to study and to begin to understand. But they did flee out of certain, to certain parts of Africa. Okay? And other parts of the world. See?
The reason why I ask you is because if you look at the Sudan, the Sudan continued to build pyramids after pyramid building had ceased in the ancient Nile Valley area of around the Mediterranean, where the Great Pyramids are, and around there. But in the Sudan, which is further south, they continued to build pyramids. And if you look at Ethiopia, the rock-hewn churches, which I would like for you to speak about, you see tremendous building like nothing else in the world, where they built these temples down into the ground. But very little seems to be known about when those temples were built and exactly why, because they are looked at today as Christian churches. But I don't think that's correct, and I wanted to get your opinion of those rock-hewn churches over there in Ethiopia. What period, who the people were that built them, and for what purpose?
Okay, now, like I mentioned before, going on with your questions, you asked me what happened once the Greeks got into Egypt, where did a lot of the ancient Egyptians go? Again, a lot of them stayed in Egypt, and they went to other parts of Africa, including the other parts of Africa being the Sudan and being Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and they went into the northern part of Africa. Also, all those countries named along the Mediterranean, which is called North Africa: Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, so forth and so on. So they went in that direction. They also went into Turkey, into Northeast Africa, into Arabia, what we know today as Arabia, Syria, what we know today is Syria, and up in Iran, what we know today as Iran, and so forth and so on. Now, getting to Ethiopia, this is something that people, and about those churches, this is something that people, especially I hear scholars of African descendants, talking about Ethiopia, and they think that Christianity started with the Coptic Ethiopian Christians. No, it didn't. Okay? If you get my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, I'll walk you through the progression of history of how Christianity actually started. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Ethiopia, the first known European, I'm talking about by way of history, the first known European to come into Ethiopia, which was called Abyssinia at the time, mm-hmm. was James Bruce, a Scotsman. Mm-hmm. He came in there looking for the source of the Nile.
Yes.
Okay? And he wrote 5 volumes titled To Discover the Source of the Nile. He was over there in the 1780s. Mm-hmm. And in 1790, he wrote these 5 volumes to discover the source of the Nile. So I would say that James Bruce was the first European to go into Abyssinia, known as Ethiopia, in the 1780s. Mm-hmm. Also, it is also known historically that the Europeans did not begin to come into Ethiopia until the 19th century. The 19th century, okay? And that those Ethiopians at that time were not Christians. Christianity was not practiced in Ethiopia. Christianity was not practiced nowhere in Africa, but in the city, double-walled city of Constantinople, at the very first Christian church ever built, mm-hmm. called the Hagia Sophia, which Justinian and his wife built that church, caused it to be built by African architects and African builders in 532, and they finished it 5 years later, 537. Mm-hmm. And my wife, in my book, The Historical Origin of Islam, writes about that church. What happened to the church of Hagia Sophia? Mm-hmm. A very important chapter. Now, and I encourage everyone who's listening and looking at this video to get my book, The Historical Origin of Islam, and also The Historical Origin of Christianity. Now, so therefore, in Ethiopia, the Europeans began to come in there in the 19th century. Mm-hmm. In the latter part of the 18th century. I told you the first known European came in there was James Bruce, who was looking for the source of the Nile. And he came into Ethiopia, and at that time it was called Abyssinia, and the capital of Abyssinia was Gondar, Gondar.
Correct.
Okay, and he poked around in there, and he left, and he went back into Scotland. He was a Scotchman, and he wrote his 5-volume book called To Discover the Source of the Nile. Now, who began to bring Christianity into Ethiopia? That's the question, and this is where we need to focus, and I will try to shed some light on that.
Okay.
It was the Church of England. In 1799, the Church of England created what is known as the CMS, Church Missionary Society. In 1809, 10 years later, they created a society a Christian society to teach non-Christian countries Christianity. Okay, very key.
That's 1809. 1809.
1799, the Church of England created a missionary society. CMS, Church Missionary Society. In 1799. 10 years later, in 1809, they created a Christian society to teach non-Christian countries Christianity.
Now, Walter, I just want to interrupt and ask you, why was it necessary for other countries, outsiders, to convert people to their way of, to their religion or their way of life? What's the purpose of it?
To control the people, to control humanity. See, when a person is a Christian or embraces any type of religion, you become enslaved with that religion. That religion enslaves you, puts you into bondage, because all religions have laws, customs, rituals, and ceremonies for you to abide by. You know, you take it like the Muslim. You got Muslims out there praying 5 times a day with hickets on their head. Okay? That person's in bondage. He's not free. Christians go to church, take up communion, take up mass, go to Roman Catholic Church and take mass ceremonies, practice, mass, and so forth and so on. That's bondage. You see?
Not only that, you're predictable, and by following the traditions and the rules and regulations of that religion, you're put under the domination of the head of that religion.
Correct.
So that they control you through that religion.
Correct. That's just like, I'm glad you brought that up. That's just like this little boy here.
Okay.
He's in control, or under the control of Christianity. And he's also under control of this image. See, and I'm going to read you what it says there. It says, at a church in Brooklyn, New York, a solitary boy communes with his God. Now, who is his God? Look up there and see who his God is. It's a white image. And look at him. He's an African young man born in America. Okay? A descendant of the ancient Egyptians. He doesn't know that. But he is communing with his God. His God is a white man. Okay? And that God that he's worshiping and giving all of his power away, the power that was given to him at the time of his birth, is now being given away to this image. Okay? That makes him powerless. Okay? And this image that he is worshiping don't even look like him or any member of his family. It's a disgrace. And the enemy in our African community, in America, and throughout the world, is the minister. Where this young man goes to church, his minister encourages him to bow down to an image, a dead white man on the cross that don't even look like him. And bow down to and give all his power away to this image, thus making him powerless. Every time an individual goes sitting in a pew of a church, he gives all of his power away.
Now, that also was used to enslave the African continent during the invasion of Africa by Europeans. Missionaries came to pave the way.
Well, of course, this is what I was beginning to tell you, how it all began with the missionaries. It started with the Church of England. You see, going back, 1799, they created a Church Missionary Society, CMS. 10 years later, they created a Christian society to teach Christianity to all non-Christian countries with the missionaries. This is done in 1809. Okay? There was no Europeans, there's no history of a European in Ethiopia or the Sudan. The Europeans, even the Byzantine rulers and the Ottoman Turkish rulers, did not come that far south because there was they were landlocked. See, they stayed along the Mediterranean.
Well, let me ask you, I just want to throw this in. What was the territory boundaries of the Greek and Roman rule of ancient Egyptian and North Africa?
I gave that to you.
Okay, you did.
I already gave it to you. I told you the Byzantine rulers, okay, which is under the Roman rulers, and the Byzantine Empire was started by Constantine in 430 by going into a northeast Africa, into a city called Byzantium, turning that city of Byzantium and renaming it Constantinople. Today, Constantinople is known as Istanbul, Turkey. Okay? And that Byzantine Empire and rulers controlled all of North Africa, all those countries along North Africa, Egypt. They went into Northeast Africa, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. It wasn't no Iraq then. Iraq wasn't created until 1920 under the British, when they was given a mandate by the League of Nations in 1920 after World War I. And they boarded off a portion of Iraq, a portion of Arabia to make Iraq. And they also boarded off Iraq to make Kuwait. In other words, to break up that oil reserves over there. Okay? And then you got Iran. Afghanistan borders Iran. See? And then you got Yemen, which is further south of Northeast Africa. And then you got Syria. And then in 1922, under the mandate given to the French by the League of Nations, they